Blackwood and Fig, and this stream is brought to you by purplecircle.io. Do you have an idea? Are you trying to get into business development? Head on over to purplecircle.io today for your free consultation. Hey everyone, my name is Will Figueroa, and I'm really excited to be joined with KJ Blackwood in the beginning of what I think is going to be an amazing series that we're titling Blackwood and Fig. I'm going to be your host, and I'm just honored, truly, after finding out that a dear friend and colleague of mine in our 9 to 5 is a published author. And I thought that this was going to be so cool to be able to have a talk and chat and really dive into not only his series called 7 Endings, but to be able to talk about anything else that he writes. Here's the book. You can find it on Amazon, 7 Endings by KJ Blackwood. I'm really excited to be able to speak to him, dive into his mind and his thoughts in regards to this. The subtitle, 7 Short Stories to Make Your Skin Crawl and Your Eyes Water, is an understatement. So before we get into this, and the first of in this series, we'll go for every short story. We'll do an episode, and we'll start there. But before we do that, I want to introduce the author himself, Mr. Blackwood. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us where the ideas of the stories came from, and where do you see this possibly going?
Well, it started in 2012. Yes, 2012, when I walked out of my job. I think everyone has a crisis at some point in their life, don't they? And
Right.
Several things had happened. Some friends had died, and there were relationship issues. And so I'd moved out. I'd moved in with my best friend. And so that's why I had my passport with me. And I was at work, and I just thought, you know what? I don't want to be here now. And I mentioned it before. I said to my assistant manager, would you mind going to a meeting for me? I've just got to pop out and do something. And I went to Heathrow, and I bought a ticket to Thailand. And on the way, I bought a T-shirt and some shorts and some flip-flops, and I flew out to Thailand. And I just didn't go back to work. And while I was there, because I wasn't in a good place.
Yeah, of course. You're trying to escape, right?
Yeah. I started writing, and I just had all these ideas for these stories based on people that I met or experiences that I'd had. The first one, which is I think it's the Maid, isn't it? Is inspired by the people I met in Thailand, because I ended up, I flew out, and I'd gone on Facebook, and a girl I've known since I was 5 years old, so that's 40 years now, she happened to be online, and she lived in Thailand. And I said, if I were to turn up tomorrow, could I stay for a couple of nights? And she said, yes. And so I arrived, and then I rented a flat in the same building that she was in, just on the outskirts of Bangkok. And so I got to know everyone in the building, and it was full of expat teachers. And when you're an expat, and I was an expat as a child as well, because I lived in Saudi Arabia and Hong Kong as a child. When you're an expat, it's a very different life to being at home, because someone in a perfectly ordinary job, so a teacher in Thailand, you'll have a cook, you'll have a maid, you might even have a driver. Whereas back in the UK, you simply wouldn't in that kind of job. And what I found interesting was that everyone I spoke to would say, the maid, she's like one of the family. And I'd be thinking, no, she's not.
Yeah.
You might think of it
Absolutely.
that way.
Yeah.
But she probably hates you. She's living with you. She's got children of her own that she doesn't ever get to see. She looks after your kids, and you think she's another family. No, she's not. She's your servant, and she probably hates you. But they would always say, oh, yes, she's just like one of the family. And they seemed delusional to me. And so I started writing a story based on that. Initially set in Thailand, because where I was, but I found it didn't work somehow setting it there. So I moved it to London, and there are many people in London that have maids and au pairs, and there's a certain type of character that lives in the west of London, overprivileged, who again, they think the maid is like one of the family. But my maid, she really does despise them. She really does, and she's bitter because she can't be with her children. And I'm not going to reveal the ending, but
I don't
not very
know.
nice.
I mean, she's not. I felt, I felt very triggered by her, to be quite honest, as I'm reading this, because you often hear of these horrible stories of nannies, and that's why they have nanny cams, and with Facebook and everything else online, right? You see this horrible, like heart-wrenching footage. And I can't be the only one who thinks, oh, that'll never happen to me, right? And as I'm reading this, and as you so brilliantly wrote, really about her mindset and how she almost felt a game of really hurting the children as a release of her own pain because she can't be with her own children. Quite frankly, it was both heart-wrenching and at the same time just so intriguing. In regards to talking about the ending, I don't know. I'll leave it up to you because it's so juicy. The entire series is just phenomenal. So if you want to tease it out, I'm more than happy to do so. However you want. You go ahead and lead the way. Okay. But there's definitely some questions. Not only myself, but my wife. I said to her, "Hey, I have this friend, and I think this is the beginning of something kind of big. He wrote this book, and I think it's brilliant. Do you mind reading it?" And I said, listen, you're going to get to a point where, because it's Valentine's Day weekend as we're recording this, it's look, there's a couple stories in there that are kind of heart-wrenching. You may want to stop at this point. And I wake up this morning and she says, I got to the fourth story. She says she couldn't put it down. It was so juicy. So if you want to talk in the front side of the episode and kind of tease it out, and then towards the end, maybe we'll have a spoiler-free segment up front, and then maybe towards the end we could speak about it. So go ahead and tease it out a little bit, and tell us a little bit more about the development of this character. It's Ascension, right? Is that how you pronounce it?
Ascension, yes, yeah.
Ascension.
I thought it was a good sort of Filipino name. Well, what I thought was interesting about her is that she seems like a bad person, but she's only a bad person because of circumstance. So if she could have remained at home with her children, she'd be as good as anyone else. She's been driven to this by bitterness. And there's a whole section of the world that is basically indentured to another section of the world. And it's just so sad. And it's basically the white Western world that employs other areas of the world, and I think it's just it's appalling. And so this poor I say this poor maybe because she does such terrible things, and she's got cruelty in her, which she's a mother, and you think, how could a mother do these things to a child?
Yes,
and in
absolutely.
Fact, a lot of people that have given me feedback about this didn't like the story because they found it too upsetting. Parents found it too upsetting because cruelty to a child is beyond the pale. It's absolutely unacceptable. But she's got her reasons for being that way. Are they valid? Is it ever valid to be cruel? I don't know. Probably not.
It's definitely as someone who understands trauma, and even in my own life, I'm not afraid to speak about some of the recovery that I've gone through as someone who's been through childhood PTSD. So I understand from her perspective how traumatizing it could be of the situation in and of itself. Now, I don't think I'll ever be able to empathize with an au pair or a nanny who's been able to, who's had to separate from their own children. But as a father, as a father to, someone who I would consider my princess, I can never fathom being, away, from her even for a weekend, let alone being able to do it as a career. And as you wrote in the book, I think it was only for maybe 2 weeks at a time, that she was able to see her children throughout the year. And it was just so heart-wrenching in and of itself. So to your point about understanding where this character is coming from, I think everyone in trauma, I think, can understand a coping mechanism, right? I think we all have something that, good, bad, or indifferent, that we do because of a traumatic situation or a really bad, long-term situation, like in the story of the Maid. I think those who can understand that, like we could almost empathize. To your point, I don't know. I definitely would not go as far as this character did. I thought it was very interesting the way that you wrote, even the psychology of the character, in which you wrote something in regards to how she even found it like a game, where she knew that she couldn't hurt Peter, the small child in the story, the son of the family. She knew that she couldn't hurt Peter, so she found it as a game to almost figure out, how can I hurt this child, or how can I express my anguish while at the same time not leaving a mark. I thought this was insane. I thought this was so just beautifully sick and twisted, because it only added, I think, to pun intended, the fuel to the fire towards the end. You like what I did there?
Yeah.
So I think,
and it's
go ahead.
I was going to say, it's little things like stones in the shoes, so simple but so painful, and so irritating. But he can't complain because he's scared of her. And in fact, the boy's broken because of her cruelty. He's scared, he's quiet, but his parents don't notice, because they're, like so many these days, they're obsessed with their own lives and their smartphones, and so they don't see the misery right in front of them.
Yeah. When you wrote the story, you made it very you made it a point to speak about, and I love the dichotomy between the lack of interest or lack of presence with the mother. The mother was very cold, and not cold as in mean-spirited, but cold as in very separate. And yet at the same time, you wrote so colorfully the anguish, and it was a beautiful dichotomy between the mother and Asensin when you wrote about her anguish and you wrote about what she's having to go through. It was so colorfully mean. It was so colorfully angry in comparison to the mother, who you would hope there would be a color of of maternity, of femininity, and you hit a little bit in regards to the femininity of the mother, but you made that as a sense of pride versus coming from a sense of where she serves as a mom. And I loved that difference. Can you speak a little bit more about that dichotomy between the mom and the nanny, and why did you make it so different? What was the ultimate impact that you're looking for in writing those two characters so differently?
Well, I think people assume a mother's love is like the pinnacle of love, isn't it? Because they create this child, they give birth. There's a connection that there isn't between anything else. And so mothers are really held on a pedestal. But both these mothers are pretty dreadful, but in different ways. So Peter's mother, why did she bother having a child? She's completely disinterested, doesn't care. What's the point? But he's blonde haired, blue eyed, so wonderful. She's winning. Asuncion, though, she wants to be a mother. She'd like nothing more than being with her children. So in that respect, she would be a great mother. and then her bitterness turns to cruelty. And so these two mothers are both they're both examples of bad mothers, in effect. That's what they are. It's quite dramatic what she does. To feel so much pain that you would kill, and to take the life of a child is the worst thing anyone can do. I think a lot of people think that, and she does it. And I think to myself at the end, when I think of the plots and I think of the characters, they're like real people in my head, and I wonder to myself at the end, as she's doing it, does she get a sense of relief? Does she feel avenged? I don't know, but I wonder. I'd love to know what was going through her mind, because to me, she is like a real person.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great comment coming in from my beautiful wife. She says, "But she's left her children almost to the same fate because she's not around." What's your thought on that?
Oh no, her children are dead at the end.
Right.
So,
Well, she's left them. She's left them to work, right? And
well,
I think that's
yes,
the point.
but that
I think that's the
that's the
point
sad thing,
to Nat's point
and
here.
that's a financial necessity. If she stays, they don't
Mm,
have a life because they don't get educated. They might not get fed. So she has to leave, and that is a real issue for so many people in these parts of the world. It really is. Only recently there was somebody's written a book, an English lady about my age who had a Filipino nanny in London, and who said she was like one of the family. And they interviewed the nanny, and the nanny is now in her 70s or 80s, and um, she said that she regretted moving back to the Philippines because she didn't know her children anymore. And in the 2 weeks every year when she would go and see them when they were little, the first week she was getting to know them again. And then in the second week, she'd have to leave. And when she finally went back when they were grown up, she simply didn't know them. And she now lives on her own, and doesn't have that family, nor does she have a family in London, because she was never really a part of their family. And it pains me to think that there are thousands, if not millions, of women having to do this, having to leave their families because they don't have money, and the only way to earn it is to go abroad. I mean, my family are all in Hong Kong. Everyone in Hong Kong has a maid, and all the maids are from the Philippines, and they get one day off a week, and on that day they all gather together in the city, um, putting picnics down and things, and just it's almost like a swarm of ladies, and that saddens me because they're getting their camaraderie from their friends, but they'd much rather be with their families, I'm sure.
yeah, of course. I can't
It saddens me.
imagine. I have to
And
ask.
so,
Yeah, yeah, please.
I was just saying, so yes, she's left her children, and that's terrible. But there's no other option. So it's stay and everyone suffers, or you go, they get to have an education.
Sure.
Mm.
So my limited understanding of Filipino culture is that oftentimes the father is the breadwinner. Can you explain why you purposely left out any mention of the father in regards to the story in and of itself? Did you not think that it would be as impactful? Did you want to keep it as a short story, and so you didn't want to elaborate on why Ascension's husband wasn't involved? Can you speak in regards to that?
It's partly because, yes, I wanted to keep it as a short story, and also because all my interactions with mates, um, no one ever mentioned their husband. No one ever did. So I couldn't even tell you if the people that I knew, if there was a husband at home looking after the kids, or if they'd left. I've actually no idea. It was almost as if it was just never mentioned, which is interesting in itself, actually. So that is very interesting.
So if you had to put in regards to, I guess, a scale from 0 to 100 of the story is based on true events or inspired by true events, how much of the story is actually real?
The only real aspect is that people that have maids will say they're part of the family, and they believe it when they say it. They actually believe it,
Mm,
but it's just not true. It's just not true.
yeah, clearly.
Certainly, I think the characters as they are do exist in real life. So the slightly distant father, the self-obsessed mother, the maid living in another country, they all exist. So the characters are real, but the situation is not. No, so they're not. The maid herself is not based on any particular person that I met, and
That was my
father
biggest
and the
fear.
father.
As I'm reading this and knowing you, I thought to myself, "Oh gosh, I hope that this isn't based on, a person that he knows. I hope that this isn't his own experience." Oh goodness. So in that regard, I'm relieved. Where do you think your propensity to some of these sad stories, right? You have the subtitle here: 7 short stories to make your skin crawl and your eyes water. Where did this propensity of yours come from to capture these arguably 7 stories or 7 moments, or curate these moments in life, and to synthesize either these skin crawling or these eye watering moments? Why was it important for you to capture this and then ultimately publish?
I think because I've always had a sort of dark side to my character. I always look for the darkness in things. I've never been one of these people that sees rainbows and unicorns everywhere. I'm quite cynical, and I think human nature veers to the negative. It veers towards the negative, and I think ultimately humans, as a species, are not kind and thoughtful and generous. They're not. I wish they were, but I think if they were, or if the majority were, we'd be living in a much nicer world. Um, and and I think that's why these stories, people relate to them, even though what happens in them isn't. It's exaggerated, isn't it? Because people don't generally murder children and things. But I think we can all relate to that darkness and the feelings, certainly the negative feelings. And whereas some people will see the best in something, I think I've never liked a happy ending. That's the thing. So
I love that. I laugh because I can relate. Not everything is always a Magic Kingdom,
it's
ending,
not Disney. Yeah, life
Yeah,
is not
yeah.
Disney. And any film with a happy ending, it's a fairy tale. It's not true. Happy ever after? No, it doesn't happen. Um, even if someone appears to have a good life on the outside, you never know what's going on the inside, and they could be dying inside. You just don't know. Um, there's no such thing as a happy ending. We see all these celebrities everywhere, and you think, wow, what a great life. If I had that life, I'd be so happy. But they're not. So that's why so many of them have to go into rehab and they take drugs and drink and everything because of the pressure. Um, and I think there's a lot of darkness in life. There really is. I say call me a cynic. I am a cynic. Um, so yeah, I tend to see the negative. I could never write a happy story. I did try actually. I tried writing a comedy, and it was just rubbish. It was absolute rubbish. It didn't read true. It read like a sort of pastiche of crap, you know. And in fact, I do think books and films with happy endings, they're fluff. They can be nice to lose yourself in if you need to feel a bit uplifted, but they don't make me think. So, for example, if I don't know, say there was a story about some people that go down a mine and they're never seen again. That's much more interesting to think about than if they go down a mine and then they come out, I think. So if there's a rescue, I think, well, that's spoiled the ending now because it's all happy. You know, it needs to be real, and I think life generally, for most people, is a struggle, and you don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. You could be having a wonderful life this year, unlikely for most people, but you could be having a wonderful life this year. 2 years from now, you could be in the gutter. You could be in the gutter now. 5 years from now, you could be living in a multi-million-pound apartment somewhere. You know, you simply don't know. And I always think everything good, while it's wonderful when you have it, it's fleeting. It's not forever. Everything passes, and ultimately everything does. And that's why in each of my stories, something ends or dies in all of them. Because I suppose that's life.
Yeah, so
sorry.
No, I think it's quite intriguing. I don't think it's depressing at all. And we're getting just about the half-hour mark. So I want to make this the point in the show, and as this continues, you know, we'll do the 30 minutes of tease, and then we'll do the second half, and we'll kind of reveal everything. What do you say about that? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. So no, and I don't think it's depressing. My immediate question to you then afterwards would be then is the hope of any of your works to then ultimately create a sense of treasure, a sense of appreciation for the moment because you know it's fleeting? Could that possibly be where some of this is coming from for you, that you are just so although you may be writing about things that are life and maybe depressing, or in the case of Seven Endings, things that make your skin crawl, like your eyes water, is it really just ultimately your unique way of telling people to capture the moment, appreciate the moment? So in case of The Maid, appreciate your children, understand who's working for you, who's working with you.
Yeah.
Would you say that to be true, and would you care to elaborate?
I would actually, because I think when you watch or read anything disturbing, there's a sense of relief that you're not going through that. So if you watch a horror movie, it's exciting and it can be terrifying, but there's also a sense of relief that, you know, you're not stuck out somewhere with a serial killer. It's like I suppose it's almost like Schadenfreude, where taking pleasure in other people's misfortune because you're not going through it yourself. I mean, I used to have a feel-good movie when I was a teenager. It was called Nil by Mouth, with I think Gary Oldman directed, and it had Kathy Burke and Ray Winston, and it was the most harrowing movie. It was about a woman living on a council estate in South London with her husband, who's a wife beater, and it's brutal. It's so brutal and quite distressing to watch. But I used to say it was my feel-good movie because I'd think, however bad life could be, it wasn't as bad as the characters in that movie, and so that would make me feel better about my life and think, thank God it's not that bad, and I think we should do that anyway. Life can feel hard, but I think I'm very lucky that I'm in the UK. I'm not in a war zone. There's food on the table. With the world, the UK, it's not in a good place at the minute, but there are much worse places to be, and you need to be aware of those bad places and bad concepts to appreciate what you do have. Yeah, doing that.
Yeah, I think that's
What you have.
bittersweet. I think that's bittersweet. I think it's beautiful, and I know even as you're speaking in regards to even just the first story, I now understand the second and third story that I'm currently in now. It makes sense. It makes sense, and I think it shows. Not that it's depressing or that it's dark. Quite frankly, I think it's the fact that because you show such a dark or really just kind of these heart-wrenching moments. I think what you're doing is just naturally engaging a sense of gratitude. I think what you're doing is and Tony Robbins is actually kind of known for this. There's a whole segment that he does on a weekend where he kind of speaks about the worst case scenario, and he brings you out of that so that you can have a sense of gratitude. So to your point, I think it's a wonderful tool. It may not be the best tool for everyone, but it is a great tool to really understand a sense of gratitude and a sense of hope and a sense of happiness, and to realize, to your point, it's not that bad. And then you go, well, in fact, maybe I do have it kind of good. And then you go, well, actually, well, man, thank God I have this, and thank God. And now you're just, on a roll, kind of engaging this gratitude machine. So I think that's really interesting. All right, so
I think you're right, though. It's not for everyone. As in,
it is correct.
Depending on how your mind works, the stories could actually, you might be quite disturbed by them and think, oh God, I wish I had read that. But I think if, depending on how your mind works, you might be able to appreciate the good, having read the bad.
I think so too. We're now at the half-hour mark, and so we're gonna rip the Band-Aid off of this now. So if you haven't read The Maid, in Kelvin's book, 7 Endings, this is now, this is your spoiler alert. Okay, he mentioned before that he does have this propensity to write about things that end, so people die or things end very abruptly. So I don't think that was too much of a spoiler as much as it was him kind of explaining his literary style or his writing style. So now that we've got the warning out there, we now know, hey, if you haven't read Kelvin's book, 7 Endings, titled KJ Blackwood by KJ Blackwood, go read it now. Now's the time. All right. Moment. Okay. Done. The alarm is out. Holy mackerel. Okay. So the way that this ends leaves so many questions. And it's so.
I hope I can answer them.
Well, we later find out that the maid hears of the death of her children. Where does that come from? Was that a real story that you've heard? Was it?
No, it wasn't real. I made that up. I just thought this is someone who she's got so little. What's the worst thing that could happen to her? And it's got to be the loss of her children. And then what will she do? What will that do to her? It would destroy a mother, wouldn't it? And she despises the family that she's with so much that she wants to take the same thing from them. And so she does, in the most horrible way. She gets some gas from the petrol station. And I didn't want to describe what she actually does. I think it's better
to
please to what happens.
Please go into this. Yes, because my wife and I, and she's in the comments below, she's going, Whew, this is not that it's made up. My wife and I, she's so beautiful that she's in the comments. So thank you for being on, love. We were going back and forth in regards to this, and we have this debate. So you let us know if we're right or wrong, or feel free to tease us and not tell us. My angle on the ending of The Maid is that when she hears of the death of her family, her children, she becomes so lunatic and so filled with anguish. Like to your point, she ends up going to the gas station, the petrol station, picking up a can and lighting herself on fire. The question is, keeping in mind that her game was to induce pain without any physical marks, the way that it reads, does she off herself and make Peter watch, or does Peter die too?
Peter dies too.
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh, my heart! Oh my gosh!
Yeah. She's killed the 4-year-old.
Oh no! Oh gosh, look, there she is. There she is. I knew it. I knew it.
Yes.
The way that it read, you didn't go into details in regards to Peter. And the way that you wrote the Maid, she was all about causing pain. And so I thought, and maybe it's just a season in my own life, I thought that her ultimate pain was that she would continue this psychological trauma and make him watch. That's what I thought. I thought it was the Maid having tortured the boy so long that she would have continued this torture psychologically for his lifetime. And that's why when you continue to write at the dinner table, the parents would speak about this for their lifetime and the grief. I thought it was because the entire family would forever be affected by this. I would not have thought the way that you wrote it. I would not have thought that you would have offed the child too. Although I understand, right? Because if I can't have my kids, you're not going to have, your kids either, right? Yeah. So I understood that, but the way that it wrote, it left it so open. And to Nat's comment below, she's left the family feeling her tragedy for years to come. Yeah. That's the quote from the book,
yes
right?
Yes and no. So she wants to punish the family here in the UK, and so she wants to punish mum and dad. So she decides to. She's had enough herself. She's broken, and she's going to go out, and she's taking Peter with her, and that will punish them. However, when I say that they talk about it at dinner parties for years to come, it's because they're not as affected by it as most parents would be.
Oh, that's even more cold. Oh gosh.
Yes. It becomes a dinner party story for them eventually.
Oh my God, Kelvin.
Because they're not good parents. They're not good parents.
Because they weren't good parents.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
In fact, they probably like the drama of it because they've got a story to tell forever and get sympathy as well. And did you like
right? Because that was the sense of pride, right? She loved talking to her friends on her BlackBerry, and I assume there was an air of gossip, right? The way that she's kind of written as the character, as the character of the mom. So, oh my gosh, so I wouldn't even have thought about the mom even having a separation. Oh my gosh. And that's even more sick and twisted because she's using it I love this. She's using this as a continuation of her own air of pride, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. horrible.
It's not very nice, is it? It's not very nice.
No,
So Peter has this awful end, and was he ever even loved? What a terrible, sad life. Short, sad life for him. And smelling of roast pork. Because I remember I saw a documentary many years ago about cannibalism during the Second World War, and they said that humans, when cooking, smell like pork.
oh my
And that always
gosh.
stuck me. It's just, oh, it's horrific. So I thought I'd throw that in there. The smell of barbecuing meat.
Oh, it's horrific. I need to write this down. that is,
So yes,
it's so oh, it's juicier. I love the story even more to hear about your emphasis on even the mother's character. The other question that that I had was in regards to Peter's father. Was there a reason why? Was there a reason why, much like Ascension's husband, that you didn't write too much about Peter's father? Was it really just to emphasize like fatherlessness, or was there more to it than that?
no, it's because there's a certain type of person, tends to be a banker or something. They're not present in their children's lives or in family life very often. They go to work all day. When they get back, kids are in bed already. They hardly see them, and I think that's actually quite common in a lot of families, that the father isn't there. He brings the money in so they can have a lovely life, but as a consequence of that, there's little connection with children. In fact, when I was a child, I adored my father, but he used to work abroad a lot. So we didn't see him as much as we would have liked. He could be away for weeks at a time. And it's just very common. Lots of people I know had the same sort of experience growing up. And it's always, everyone's close. You're always closer to your mother because that's the one that you see, and not the father.
So if you had,
you see your children a lot more.
yeah, oh my gosh! And after reading this story, it's like my baby.
Hold them close.
Talk about
Yes.
talk about instilling a sense of gratitude. Talk about instilling a sense of appreciation and love. And to your point, right? Like, although it may be dark, it may be again, the subtitle says it all: skin crawling, or it makes your eyes water. It really does turn on a switch of realization. There's a real epiphany if you haven't already had it, or if you don't, or if you do have it. I think it exponentially increases the urge of appreciation and gratitude and love, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whether you're having an aha moment of, oh my gosh, I need to appreciate my wife more. I need to appreciate my children more, my life more. I need to or even just being the catalyst of I think I need to be more grateful. I think the sense of the stories definitely help to a certain extent. People go, wow, what do I have? So I think the impact, at least for the first story of The Maid, in 7 endings by KJ Blackwood. Here, let me pull up the screenshot here. I think does it. I mean, you do it really well. There's no other way to describe it. Well, I think it's just phenomenally. I think, again, I can't say it enough. There's no other word. To me, it's brilliant. I often, and we spoke via text message before this in regards to some of my immediate reactions when I found out that you wrote the book, that I don't often read fiction. I'm very much a nonfiction guy. I read personally. I read a lot of theology. I read a lot of business books. I do the self-help like everyone else. I do. Recently, I've been dabbling into things like Chinese culture, Chinese history. So that's something that I really kind of enjoy and kind of dabble in here and there. But I don't.
I'm half Chinese, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I'll get to that. That's a great teaser for next week for the dark photographer, because I have some cultural questions there to ask you.
Okay.
But to the point in regards to like how it makes you feel, this was really, really well done. My question to you now, with the little time that we have left, is there anything else in regards to the Maid that we haven't discussed that you felt like after you published, maybe you needed to elaborate more on, maybe you wanted to have expanded more on, or is there a character or a situation in the story of the Maid that maybe you wanted to elaborate more on, just a little bit more to maybe give context, or maybe there was something that was missing?
Not that was missing. I think one of the things I put in there was that when she goes to school, all the other maids and nannies and all the other people looking after, delivering their children, they're all either mothers in their 30s and 40s because I've lost you. They're either mothers in their 30s and 40s because middle class people tend to have their children later, or it's nannies who are much younger. They're always young white girls from either England or South Africa or Australia. And so there's no one like her. Lost you. Did you hear all that? Or I don't
Yes. I'm producing, brother. I'm producing. So keep it going.
So yes. So she's on her own, because even though there are other maids and au pairs delivering children as well, they're just not like her. So I think, as I say it in the story, they're all different, but they're the same, because they're just young white girls that are doing it because it's almost like a holiday job or something, working as an au pair. Whereas for her, it's an absolute necessity. She has to do this, and she just doesn't have anyone like her. So perhaps if she had someone to talk to, she wouldn't have been so angry and bitter and exploded in the way that she did. It's just a very, very sad situation. Although I have to say, one of the best things I've heard today was you saying that you and your wife were discussing the ending and each had a different theory on what happened to Peter, because that's what I've always loved about any book or film or anything, when it's open-ended, when there is interpretation and ambiguity. I find that much more exciting, not knowing for sure. Bit like a happy ending, real life, very often you just don't know.
Yeah, it's unpredictable.
You rarely know the full story about everything. Completely unpredictable. And in any sort of story or event, the only people that really know what's going on are the people that are in it, that are living it. And even then, two people going through the same thing will have completely different opinions on what happened. So you can never say yes or no. You can never be sure, and that's why I like an ending where it makes you wonder and think, what if? So I think it's great that you both had different opinions on whether you lived or died.
Yeah, we. I mean, I'll speak for myself, and if Nat, you're still in the comments, feel free to put your comment on what you thought was your version of the ending. I know we spoke about it here at home. My understanding was that, or the way that I interpreted the ending for myself was that she was so sick and twisted. The maid was so sick and twisted that she forced Peter to watch, and that initiated because the way that it was written, it stated that the family, right, the family would for years to come talk about their grief at dinner parties. So I assume family with mother, father, and child. So I thought there was a reconnection, but because of Ascension, that there would always be this rift. There would forever be a proverbial rock in the shoe, in this case, a rock in the mind, to really get back at the family, the mother, the father, and the son. What I find also interesting is that there are no other children. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if that was purposeful or to emphasize maybe the coldness of the family. And then the fact that the father was missing, so Peter's father was missing, and how just absolutely twisted and just crazy how this story ends. I thought maybe the father was in on the murder. I thought that the father was somehow involved. That's why I wanted more. I was like, oh my gosh, I need more of this story. I got to know more of these characters. I don't know if you have enough for a spinoff. I would love to get a spinoff from like different perspectives of this story. Well, I think it's worth mentioning.
The thing about them talking at dinner parties, I don't know what it's like in America, but certainly in England, there's a thing about, there's like a dinner party scene where couples will get together, and there's nothing worse at a dinner party than somebody being boring and having nothing to say. So people need good stories, and what better story than your murdered child, and to get some sympathy as well.
I mean, you would absolutely get the sympathy and intrigue at a dinner party. I love the comment from that. I'm a little darker in my thinking, so when they didn't mention Peter, I knew. You know, me too. Me too. I definitely wasn't thinking what she thought. I think. She's also an English literature major, so maybe she has the advantage over me. I'm just a tech nerd, right? I'm just a geek in the corner who produces these shows, right? But yeah, I wanted so much more out of this. Even just the first story. Would you ever consider, as we continue the series, speaking about 7 endings? Would you ever consider doing a second one of these stories where you maybe have a different perspective? So maybe 7 perspectives or 7 views, or kind of a play on words here, or are you satisfied with the way that it was published and it's kind of a one and done?
I'm satisfied with these stories as they are, but there's certainly more that can be done. But those particular stories, I think as they are, they contain everything they need to contain. So I'm looking forward to actually telling you about where some of the other ones come from, the inspirations, and to see what you think of that. Because in fact, yes, there are some people that they don't know that they inspired these stories, so I have to be careful.
Oh, juicy! Oh, Kelvin, what a tease. Well, let me say this, and I'll give you the last few minutes, and we'll close out. From the bottom of my heart, even if it's just 2 friends who happen to record this, thank you. This is just phenomenal. I think this is just so cool that you've taken the time out for me and this crazy idea. I think what you've written is absolutely brilliant. And I think it's just a mix of just so many things in my own life that I think I could really appreciate this art form and what you've written. Why don't you, take the last 2 minutes, if you will, here, and tease us, because I wouldn't know how else to tease other than to throw it to the author. Tease us about next week in The Dark Photographer.
Ooh. Well, he's a very bad man, and he's got no remorse. He doesn't care that people die. He doesn't care at all. But he makes beautiful art, and great art. You have to make sacrifices for that, don't you? A few lives here and there. Some would say it's worth it. People do kill for great art. They do. He just does it in a very unusual way. And God forbid that you should commission him to take a photo of your wife. So yes, no, I was really pleased with that one, and it was inspired by the picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde. The man who never ages. He never ages, and it's because there's a portrait of him in the attic, and it's the portrait that ages rather than him, and that's what got me thinking, and that's where the story came from.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, for those of us who are in the US, if you want a little bit more behind the scenes, if you want to know when we'll go live, special offers, I mean, seeing where this journey goes, we don't know, but go ahead and text BAFShow. You see it on the screen there. BAFShow to 305-697-6013. That's BAFShow to 305-697-6013. Kelvin, thank you. Thank you for the first in the series. Thank you for this time. If you haven't read 7 Endings, now is the time. Go ahead. If you have a Kindle subscription, it is on Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, head on over to Amazon.com and look up 7 Endings by our very own here, KJ Blackwood. This is the first in what I hope to be a series of not only us diving into Kelvin's books, but a bunch of other literary media, art, film, theater, whatever Mr. Blackwood here thinks is interesting. That's what we'll be talking about. I think his perspective is quite unique. We've heard that already in the beginning of today's show, and I would love to be able to continue this and so much more. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to add something, if you're in the US, go ahead and text BAFShow to 305-697-6013 for some of the behind the scenes things. Otherwise, head on over to blackwoodandfig.com. That's going to forward you over to our Facebook page, and we can continue the conversation there. Kevin, thank you so much, and we hope to see you next week.
Thank you.